Welcome into Texans today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, coming post-Super Bowl 59, and I, like everybody else, watched the absolute BTA ass whooping that the Eagles put on the Chiefs last night, but there's a lot of things that the Texans can take away from that and build on this offseason going into next year, because obviously, regardless of what happened in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs won the AFC, and for the Texans to get to the mountaintop, they have to get through Kansas City. I have some keys to get past Kansas City and what the Texans need to do this offseason if they want to compete in the AFC. But I'm going to start off by saying this, especially after watching that game last night and watching how the Texans played the Chiefs in the playoffs. The pieces are there. You can't tell me that the Texans don't have the groundwork, that they don't already have some key guys in place to contend for a Super Bowl. I saw it all this year, the ups and the downs. Obviously, it was a roller coaster season for your Texans, but I think the Texans are right there knocking on the doorstep. Do you agree with me? Like the video if you think Houston has the pieces to contend for a Super Bowl. Just take some tinkering, adding a few more pieces here and there, and I think the Texans are right there with the top teams in the AFC. If you agree with me, go down and hit that thumbs up icon. First, let's talk on the defensive side of the football, because I think that's the easier kind of point to start for the Houston Texans. The D-line can win games. That's what we saw last night. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, MVP. He was amazing yesterday for Philadelphia. But if you were able to give the MVP to a whole unit, it should have gone to the Eagles' defensive line. They were wreaking havoc all game long in Super Bowl 59. And the Texans, they happen to have some pretty good pass rushers on their side, too. In Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., these guys absolutely were wrecking shop this season. Both of them having great years. Maybe the best pass rush duo in the NFL. These dudes were putting on a clinic for everybody to see this season long. I think, really, the Texans, they have the groundwork at the defensive line to get it going. And not only on the edge rushers, not only the exterior guys, but also the guys on the interior. Now, I know Mario Edwards Jr., Foley Futakasi, both those guys are free agents, but Danico Autry, Tim Settle, those are some really good interior defensive linemen that the Texans have to really round out this whole unit for the Texans. And like I said, the Texans, they already have a great pass rush, but they have to continue adding depth. We talked about two guys, Mario Edwards Jr., Foley Futakasi, both free agents this offseason. Also, rotation edge rusher Derek Barnett is also a free agent. So the Texans have to continue to add pieces and add guys for depth, because Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, they're great, but you need continuous pressure. You need guys who, even when those guys need just a second, a snap, a breather, you're still bringing pressure to whatever quarterback you're opposing. The Eagles' second unit last night, they were, insane. Absolutely insane. Let me know, though, where do you think the Texans' pass rush ranks among all the NFL? Do you think it's, top three? I think it's top three. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. If you get hit with the YouTube ad break, perfect timing. Scroll on down and let me know, where does the Texans pass rush rank in the NFL? Next up on the defensive blueprint to beat KC, you need coverage linebackers. One of the biggest plays, and I think what really broke this play open for the Philadelphia Eagles, is the Zach Bond interception in the red zone. Eagles were already up 17-0, and that interception kind of was like the driving force that they needed to really not put the nail in the coffin, but really put their foot on the throats of Kansas City. Now, good news for the Texans. I think we have a good coverage linebacker in Azeez Al-Shire. When he's on the field, he was dealing with health issues this year. He was also dealing with the suspension from that hit for Trevor Lawrence. But when he was on the field, I think he's a pretty good guy in the middle of the defense and a good coverage linebacker as far as linebackers are considered. And also, the Texans, I loved how they used Jalen Petrie this year. He was used in somewhat a linebacker, nickel star safety role this year, and I thought that worked well whenever Petrie was playing for Houston before he got injured and had to leave for the rest of the season. Petrie was fantastic, guarding those short to intermediate routes, that the Texans needed him to throughout the whole year. So I think Jalen Petrie, him, Aziz Al-Shire, they're really good. Henry Toto, Christian Harris, both those guys, good linebackers. I'd love to see Henry Toto become a little bit better in coverage, but he's a great run stuffer in the middle of that defense. But to beat teams like Kansas City and especially take away other teams' tight ends, you need good guys in coverage at that linebacker level, which I think the Texans do have in Petrie and Al-Shire. And lastly, you need turnovers. Turnovers are the biggest difference maker. That's what changed the game last night. I talked about the Zach Bond interception. Right before that, you had the Cooper DeJean pick six. That was really what blew this game wide open for Philadelphia. And the Texans, some more good news for the defense. They have some ball hawks on that side of the football. Kalen Bullock, 5 interceptions on the year. Kamari Lasser, 4 on the year. Derek Stingley, 7. Eric Murray, 2. Now, these interceptions also include their playoff interceptions as well. But, I mean, across the board, guys who can high point the ball, guys who are able to attack it and get the ball in their hands for the defense. I think the Texans are set up well in the secondary. And honestly, I don't think the defense is the problem. The defense is what held you in that game against the Chargers, up against the Chiefs in the playoffs. That's not what's holding this team back. We all know what's holding this team back. It's what's happening on the offensive side of the football. And coming up in just a moment, I'll tell you what I saw last night from the Super Bowl that tells me kind of what the Texans need to do this offseason. Before I get into that, quick shout out to today's sponsor of the program, and that is Prize Picks. They make daily fantasy sports easy, folks. All it takes is just a few taps, and you can win real money during, I don't know, maybe basketball season. I know football is done. The big game has gone and passed, but we saw some interesting trades, I would say the least. Tonight, Luka Doncic makes his debut. They have his projection, 41.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Oh, I'm going the more on that easily. And Kyrie Irving up against, Sacramento, 27.5 points. Give me the less on that. You can use my picks, go against them. Just do it over on Prize Picks. Like I said, all you got to do, choose 2 to 6 player stat projections and go more or less. You watch the winnings roll in. And I talked about basketball season, not just, the regular games. They also have All-Star Weekend. It's almost here, and Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game and Saturday night events like the 3-point contest. Hey, that seems like a little bit of fun, right? Like a little more or less on the 3-point contest. Do it all over on Prize Picks. Go down, download the Prize Picks app today. Use that code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So get started today with our friends over at Prize Picks. Run your game. Now, we talked about the defense. Now let's talk about the offensive side of the football for Houston and what I saw from that Super Bowl last night. First off, you got to have the threat to run. Kudos to Kansas City. They took away Saquon Barkley in the biggest game of the year. But having that threat was a big part of the Eagles' offense. And you notice, even though they were stopping Saquon, they kept it going. They said, hey, we're still going to feed Saquon, even if you stop it. As the game went on, he busted a couple nice runs throughout, the course of the game. But you need that threat because what I saw from Kansas City is they had to stack the box with a running back like Saquon Barkley. Now, we all know the Texans were in on Saquon Barkley, didn't end up getting him in free agency. They went ahead and got Joe Mixon instead, which I think is a great consolation prize if you ask me. I think for what they got him and the contract they got him for, the Texans really went away with a win in free agency. I know you didn't get Saquon, but I think Joe Mixon was fantastic for Houston this year. Now, I don't think he was the problem at all. And what I'm saying the Texans need to do this offseason has nothing to do with the running back position. I think they need some more maulers on the inside because you saw the stat graphic so many times last night, the combined height and weight of the Eagles offensive line. That's real. That's big for winning in the trenches, that size, that power. And the Texans going with the agile build on the O-line, on the interior, it's not working. A smaller guy in Juice Scruggs, it's not working. These guys on the interior who are getting pushed around, it's not helping the Texans. So they need to go out either in free agency or in the draft and get somebody. Now, I'm going to look at free agency for today's video because that's what is kind of closer for the Houston Texans. All these guys are going to be free agents and available for the Texans come free agency. We saw Trey Smith last night, even though he kind of got worked by Jalen Carter a little bit. But a lot of decent names on here. Mekhi Becton from Philadelphia, the right guard. He's available in free agency. I don't know what he will garner on the free market. Will Fries, another good guy from the Colts. Some good names here. James Daniels, another young, good guard, injured this past season. Aaron Banks with San Francisco, another young, good guard. I think the Texans got to go out and get somebody in free agency. One of these names has to be a Houston Texan by the end of NFL free agency. I'm going guard on this question. But I know a lot of people are worried about the Texans wide receiver core with, Tank Dell being injured, Stefon Diggs a free agent. Let me know down in the comment section. What do you think is the bigger need on offense this offseason? Do you think it's guard or do you think it's receiver? Let me know down below your thoughts. Be honest with me. I know a lot of people are leaning wide receiver. I've seen your mocks. I've seen a lot of people send me their mock drafts. A lot of wide receivers in round 1. So let me know. What do you think is the bigger need for the Houston Texans? Next up, you must pick up the blitz. And this isn't even against Kansas City. This is against anybody for the Houston Texans because, frankly, the Texans sucked at this all year long. They were one of the worst blitz pickup teams in the entire National Football League. They were god-awful. And if you don't believe me, here's some stats to back that up. Sacks allowed. They were 31st in the NFL, only behind the Chicago Bears and rookie Caleb Williams. The pass block win rate, a stat provided by ESPN. They were 22nd in that, 58%. The run block win rate, which I know we're talking about the blitz pickup, but I just had to show the stat. 31st in the NFL with 68% in the run block win rate. And Stroud's pressure to sack rate. I found this on PFF, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I couldn't find exactly where that ranks in the NFL because PFF, their website, didn't give me that capability. But I'll tell you this, 23 is not good. Anything in the 20s for a pressure to sack rate is not good. Basically, 23% of the time that he got pressured, it ended up in a sack for the Houston Texans. And that falls on the shoulders of these guys on the screen right now. The starting offensive lineman for your Houston Texans. And those interior guys. Blake Fisher, a rookie, going into the second year. Maybe he can step up a little bit at that right tackle spot. The Texans need to be able to pick up the blitz. I was a little worried that the Texans went ahead and just promoted Cole Popovich to the offensive line coach after being the assistant this past year with how bad the O-line looked. At the end of the day, hopefully, maybe he didn't have as much say in the room. Maybe he was just being a good soldier, being a yes man. I don't know if I absolutely love that excuse, but at the end of the day, the Texans, they have to improve on that blitz pickup or else they're going to be burnt toast again this season. Next up on a blueprint to beat Kansas City, on the offensive side, you need wide receivers who win one-on-one. Last night, we saw Kansas City stack the box. They stopped the run. They stopped Saquon over and over again. What did that lead to? A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith one-on-ones, and they were winning those all game long. Now, luckily for Houston, we have a guy who I believe is a legitimate wide receiver 1 in Nico Collins. He's a really, really good target for C.J. Stroud. Long, lanky, 6'4", has a good amount of speed as well. He's going to be your wide receiver 1 going into next year. But a huge question mark around who's next to him. I asked that question earlier. Bigger concern, guard or wide receiver? Looking at it going into this year, I don't know who the Texans wide receiver 2 is. I don't trust Xavier Hutchinson or John Mechie as much. Here are some of the free agents that you can get. I think the Texans probably lean more towards the draft rather than free agency for wide receiver. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumors around Stefon Diggs. Does he want to stay in Houston? Does he maybe want to go up I-45 and go to Dallas and play with his brother for the Cowboys? Amari Cooper is another hot name. DeAndre Hopkins, we saw him struggle in the Super Bowl yesterday. I don't know if a reunion is in the books for DeAndre Hopkins, but he is a free agent. Hollywood Brown for the Chiefs as well. And Keenan Allen, just to name a few wide receivers that could be free agent targets for the Houston Texans. I don't think it's as very likely. Another interesting kind of tidbit that came out in the Super Bowl. Deebo Sameul was granted access to kind of seek out trades by the San Francisco 49ers. Is that a route the Texans go? I don't know if the Texans are willing to give up another draft pick this year. They already gave up a second for Stefon Diggs for one season. Do you want to give up another second for kind of the same situation, a Deebo Sameul for 1 year left on his contract? The money makes sense for the Texans, right? A team trading for Deebo, you're only going to have about a 2 or 3 million cap hit, I believe, if you trade for Deebo. Doesn't really make sense as much for San Francisco. They're going to be eating a ton of money, and because of that, I believe the price in a trade is going to be up there. I think it's going to be at least a second or a third round pick for Deebo Sameul this offseason. So, if Texans are willing to pay that, maybe you go out and get a guy like Deebo Sameul. I don't know if that's what I really want for the Houston Texans. I'd rather have maybe draft somebody in the second or third round. That's just my take on it, but Deebo Sameul, another option out there for the Texans to add in the wide receiver room. And lastly, what I saw last night, and the biggest reason why he won MVP of this game, I believe, is the quarterback runs. It's a must. We saw it with the Houston Texans this postseason. C.J. Stroud needs to run whenever he is pressured. That was the biggest thing that we saw from C.J. Stroud in the playoffs and why he was so effective in the 2 playoff games for the Houston Texans. I thought Stroud was magnificent in the postseason for Houston. Here's his running numbers in the 2 games. Against the Chargers, 6 rushes, 42 yards, a long of 27. Against the Chiefs, 6 rushes, 42 yards, a long of 28. Both those games, Stroud was very effective and much better than he was in the regular season. Now we turn back to Super Bowl 59. Jalen Hurts, what was his most effective point of the game last night? I would say him rushing the football. 11 carries, 72 yards, 1 touchdown. When the Eagles needed first downs, when they needed to convert, they went to Jalen Hurts in the pass game, and he was able to avoid the rush and pick up yards with his feet. Especially in that drive in the third quarter, Jalen Hurts was keeping it alive with his legs. And for the Texans offense to have success next season, Stroud has to develop. And that's 2 big things that he needs to do this offseason. 1, get in the film room and start IDing blitzes. Start just being a student of the game. Tom Brady, in his, lead up to the Super Bowl, was talking about how he was able to do everything he did, how he was such a good quarterback. He said the amount of film that he studied and the amount of time that he knew a blitz was coming and where it was coming from helped him be 1 step ahead. C.J. Stroud needs to be 1 step ahead going into next season, and he's got to use his legs. We saw how effective C.J. Stroud was in the playoffs using his legs. That's another element to his game that can really put pressure on a defense that the Texans offense absolutely needs if they want to contend in the AFC next season.